They told him he was too old for combat, that his time had passed, that younger men should lead the charge while he stayed behind and gave advice from a safe distance. He listened, nodded, and said nothing, because deep down he knew the jungle didn't care how old you were. It only cared if you could fight. It was late at night on a Pacific island in 1942, and the air was thick, wet, and heavy with the smell of rot and gun smoke. Rain tapped against leaves overhead as American troops lay low in shallow foxholes, listening to whispers and movement in the dark. Somewhere out there, Japanese soldiers were closing in, quiet and patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. Most of the men were young, scared, and exhausted, many experiencing their first real taste of combat in conditions that would break even the most hardened soldiers. One man wasn't young at all. He was in his 40s, older than most officers on the island, with a weathered face and eyes that had already seen too much war. Some men joked that he belonged back home, sitting on a porch, telling stories about earlier fights. Others said he wouldn't last a week in jungle combat. Then the attack came, and everything changed. Before we go any further, if stories like this pull you in and make you feel like you're right there in the fight, hit that subscribe button, because WW2 Vault brings you the most intense and unbelievable moments of the war every single week. What almost no one knew was that before dawn broke, this so-called old man would face wave after wave of Japanese soldiers at close range. And by the end of the night, 4 to 7 enemy fighters would lie dead around his position, most killed not by bullets, but by his own hands. When the United States entered the war in the Pacific, speed mattered more than age, and strength mattered more than rank. The jungle erased titles fast, because officers and soldiers bled the same when bullets started flying. This man had already served for decades, fighting bandits and rebels in places most Americans had never heard of long before Pearl Harbor turned the entire nation toward war, and he believed experience mattered when chaos ruled. Younger officers relied on manuals and maps, studying tactics in headquarters tents under electric lights, but he trusted instinct, sound, and the way fear moved through men in the dark. The mission seemed simple on paper. Hold the line, protect the airfield, and stop Japanese forces from breaking through during the night. But nothing in the Pacific stayed simple for long. The Japanese specialized in night attacks, crawling through brush, slipping past guards, and striking without warning. They didn't fear death, and they didn't retreat once they committed. Intelligence reports had warned that enemy forces were massing in the jungle beyond the perimeter, preparing for a major push that would test every man's resolve. The problem was brutal and clear. If the line broke, everyone behind it would die, and the airfield that American forces desperately needed would fall into enemy hands. As darkness deepened and the temperature dropped slightly in that humid jungle air, the waiting became almost unbearable. Men checked their weapons for the 10th time, whispered prayers, and wondered if they'd see another sunrise. The old officer moved quietly along the line, checking positions, making adjustments, speaking calm words to soldiers whose hands shook as they gripped their rifles. He'd seen this before, knew what was coming, and understood that fear was natural but panic was deadly. As the first shots rang out, the jungle exploded with noise, flashes, and screams, and the darkness turned into a shifting wall of shadows and movement. The old officer moved forward instead of back, shouting orders, pulling men into position, and firing his rifle until the barrel burned his hands. When his ammo ran low, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed another weapon from a fallen soldier and kept fighting. Then the enemy came too close for guns to matter. Japanese soldiers rushed his position, screaming, swinging rifles with bayonets fixed, trying to overwhelm him by sheer force and numbers. He met them head-on, using everything he had, fists, boots, knives, and broken weapons, striking fast and without pause. He fought like a man who understood that hesitation meant death, and age meant nothing when survival was on the line. Every movement was deliberate, born from years of experience in close combat situations where a single mistake meant you didn't go home. Men nearby later said it didn't look real, like watching something from another world, because he never stopped moving. He slammed one attacker into the mud, turned and drove a blade into another, then swung a rifle like a club to clear space around him. Blood mixed with rain, and the ground became slick and uneven, but he stayed on his feet, breathing hard, eyes locked forward. The sounds of hand-to-hand combat are different from gunfire, more personal, more brutal, and in those moments men discover what they're truly made of. The attacks kept coming, one after another, because the Japanese believed numbers would win the night. Each time they charged, they lost more men, and each time they fell back, the old officer was still standing. At some point, his men stopped feeling fear and started feeling something else. Confidence. They'd seen officers crack under pressure before, seen men who talked tough in daylight freeze when the shooting started, but this man was different. They rallied around him, fired when they could, and fought when they had to, because if this man could stand there at his age and refuse to die, then they could too. Hours passed like minutes, and minutes felt like years, as the jungle echoed with fighting that never seemed to end. Ammunition ran low, weapons jammed, men fell wounded, but the line held because one man refused to let it break. When dawn finally crept through the trees, the firing slowed, then stopped, and an uneasy silence settled over the battlefield. Smoke drifted between broken branches, and the cries of wounded men filled the air. American soldiers slowly rose from their positions, stiff, shaking, and alive. Then they looked around. Japanese bodies lay scattered across the ground, piled near the officer's position, some fallen by gunfire, many killed in close combat. Officers counted carefully, checking uniforms and weapons, trying to piece together what had happened in those chaotic hours of darkness. And when they finished, the number stunned everyone. 47 enemy soldiers lay dead in that small area, most of them taken down by the man they'd said was too old to fight. Word spread fast through the camp, then across the island, because stories like that don't stay quiet in war. Men who had doubted him before now watched him with a mix of respect and disbelief. Younger officers asked how he'd kept going, how he'd known what to do in the dark, and how he'd found the strength to fight for so long. His answer was simple. He said war doesn't care about your age, only your will, and when the enemy comes for your men, you either stand and fight or you don't deserve to stand at all. That night became legend, passed from unit to unit, because it proved something important in the Pacific War. The jungle didn't belong to the strongest or the youngest. It belonged to the ones who refused to break when everything went wrong. Experience, calm under pressure, and raw determination mattered more than speed or muscle. For the Japanese forces, encounters like this slowly chipped away at their confidence, because they realized American troops wouldn't run, even when attacked in the dark by overwhelming numbers. For American soldiers, it changed how they looked at leadership, because bravery wasn't loud speeches or perfect plans. It was standing in front when the worst moment arrived. The old officer survived the battle, but he never spoke proudly about what he'd done. He focused on his men, on those who lived and those who didn't, and on preparing for the next fight, because in the Pacific, there was always another fight waiting. The war moved on, island by island, leaving scars that never fully healed and memories that haunted even the strongest survivors. Years later, historians would dig through reports and first-hand accounts, trying to understand how one man could endure something so violent and exhausting. They found no secret weapon, no special training, just a soldier who refused to accept limits placed on him by others. He fought because he believed his presence could save lives, and that belief carried him through the night. Stories like this remind us that World War II wasn't only won by machines, numbers, or youth. It was won by individuals who stepped forward when they were told to step back, who fought when others thought they couldn't, and who proved that courage doesn't fade with age. Thanks for watching this story here on WW2 Vault. If you want more incredible combat stories from the war, make sure you're subscribed, because the next one might surprise you just as much as this did.